Hello and welcome back to the ALC Applied Leadership Coaching podcast. Glad to be back.
Yes,
Second in a
absolutely.
series
That's right.
with Steve Scalia from Tanner Pharma, Tim Gustafson, Applied Leadership Coaching, and me, Jason Neman from Good Brand. Always good to see you all.
You too.
What we thought we would do is maybe do a quick hit on another quick hit, I should say, on another sort of topic that we feel might be relevant in today's market. And you're unique in this particular situation because you have a company that doesn't just work domestically,
Right.
but you have ties in other countries and you're having to navigate all those waters these days.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we wanted to ask you about was, what is it like right now? And hopefully this is timely for a lot of people out there just to understand the marketplace. So give us a little insight as to, give us maybe 30 seconds on what Tanner Pharma does,
Yep.
and then kind of go into some of the things that you have to consider, some of the challenges you face, some of the positives that you have as being an international company as opposed to specifically domestic.
Great. Happy to do it. Thanks for having me back again, guys. Yeah. And Tanner Pharma Group, really privileged to be able to work with a great group of people with the core purpose of improving access to medicine and improving lives around the world. We're a US-headquartered company, but most of the services we provide to pharmaceutical companies are to help them reach patients that are outside of the US. It puts us in a unique position to have foreign entities and foreign wholesale distribution licenses, and to be able to set up a network to be able to accomplish our services in an international market. So most companies don't have the direct need to be located in more than one country. For those that do, we've learned a lot of lessons. I guess one of the biggest ones would be the process that we go through to determine which countries where we may need to have an office. There could be multiple factors that go into that. And I think another important concept is when change is happening like it is constantly, but especially now, a new administration in the US, some unknown outcomes that could come from that, international relations, tariffs, which would impact businesses that are crossing borders. It almost seems like we're reassessing the locations where we are on a continuous basis in a similar fashion to how we assess them in the first place. So I don't think it's always over once you make a decision. Especially these days, we have to be flexible. I would say though, we're generally bullish on maybe the globalization of the economies and the globalization of opportunities for businesses. We're in an information age where, in our case, patients and physicians from all around the world are aware of the medicine that's available in the United States and Europe. This is lowering the barrier to be able to deliver medicine to these folks. So I think in general, things are moving towards global expansion. At the same time, being targeted, being smart, keeping expenses down is an important factor to consider to make sure that your business is taking advantage of it.
So it seems like there's a lot of change going on, maybe not from a legal perspective, but certainly administration is putting out all sorts of different executive orders.
Yeah.
How much of an impact does that have on the laws and the regulations that you're dealing with, internationally?
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a push, there's a feel that they have, a pullback, a push forward. I don't know.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
So in general, our business has benefited in the past from having exemptions from certain laws, regulations, tariffs, import costs, or even when there are we're trying to block trade with certain countries based on other international incidents that might be happening. So we now though are looking very specifically at some of these that may have a direct impact on medicine and the delivery of medicine. And we've got to predict what might happen in the future, even though it's unclear. We've got to prepare for what might happen. What we're specifically seeing is other countries, in the same way that we're saying that the U.S. administration is proposing things or changing things that could have an impact, there's also a reaction that's happening in the other countries where we're located, and in some cases maybe even preventative or overreactions for things that haven't happened yet. So we've got to be almost looking at this three-dimensionally and not just thinking, even if the U.S. is the driver of some of this policy, the reactions to our businesses in other countries may happen sooner outside of the U.S. than it actually happens in the U.S.
So things like vaccines.
Yeah.
I know that's sort of a topic that's going on right now. If that gets pulled back here, that may create other opportunities for use of that vaccine in other countries and might be able to expand that. Is that a fair kind of
I think that's
perspective?
fair. I think one of the things we're looking at is if domestically domiciled pharmaceutical companies in the U.S., if they have their economics impacted, our patients around the world and a lot of the services we provide depend on pharma companies doing well enough in the United States that they've got the budget to be able to support the programs that we provide. So I think on a macro scale, even after we look at specific country-to-country tariff issues or employment issues by country and some of the other friction and things that might take place, what we're looking at on a macro level is our industry changing so much that either the real profitability that can be reinvested in underserved patients around the world, maybe that gets impacted, or the preventative or cautionary pullback in anticipation of something, whether it happens or not, could have a material impact on what we've got going on. I'll tell you that we've already projected and we're anticipating about a 10% loss in revenue this year, and that translates to over a 15% loss in gross profit for us because it's coming out of a service model that we've anticipated. It's on a very specific clinical trial that we have going on in the United States. And as we mentioned on the previous podcast, we try to have the discipline to stay focused on what we can control and response to this potential inevitability. We are just ramping up business development. We're sort of putting the throttle down on trying to build diversity and a lack of concentration around the one thing that we're anticipating losing, and using it as a motivator to try to lift in the other areas where we can to try to make up for that. But with it being that far outside of our control, all we can do is try to grow in other areas, and that's at this point, that's our strategy.
Yeah.
So do you think that with some of the things that are happening within our borders, do you think that that creates opportunities for development outside of the borders where you may have relationships with other pharmaceutical companies that are in Europe or South America or somewhere like that? And does that change your business model at that point?
Yeah, that's good. I know in the last podcast we talked about how looking at every risk is also an opportunity. And I think the same thing applies. It gets to the point of your question. Yes, and we're looking for these creative ways. I would also say that some of the potential policy changes in the U.S. and some of the impacts that could be made on the pharmaceutical industry for us specifically, the U.S. is sort of behind in that level of control. We've already experienced these things in our European models and in some cases our Latin American models. And to some degree in Southeast Asia as well. So the amount of regulation, the amount of impact, taxation, tariffs, these things have been happening in other markets. Now that the U.S. is coming into these sorts of conversations and a little bit more of a protectionist stance, it's nothing new for us. It was just the benefit of having the U.S. being more closer to a free market and free trade prior to this. It may have an impact on how those pharma companies are doing and then just have a knock-on effect. But we're used to seeing these things and navigating through them. And what we're hopeful for is that there's a humanitarian aspect to delivering medicine, especially to underserved patients. So if there are exceptions to these rules, we would expect them maybe to be applied to healthcare.
Yeah.
What kind of changes are you seeing in grant funding to some of these pharmaceutical companies that have, historically really relied on that kind of thing? Have you already seen an impact there, or are you seeing that kind of come in the future?
Yeah, we're seeing that now already. Grant, as you mentioned, government funded, and you've heard of NIH and maybe even BARDA. BARDA is maybe a military division of pharmaceutical research where there's funding to allow for these things to happen. A lot of the vaccines have come through BARDA and NIH funded trials. We're already seeing an impact on that. In most cases, they've been pauses or delays, but an indefinite delay is not that much different than a cancellation. But we've also seen certain things that have been delayed come right back in. So it's a lot of uncertainty, but maybe not the absolute line in the sand that we've seen before. I think the bigger risk, and I would say that the funding that the U.S. government makes, and you don't hold me to this, but that the funding that the U.S. government makes on trials is only a fraction of what globally is spent privately by pharmaceutical companies developing new products. So we're not, in the U.S. at least, relying on government pay in order to fund clinical trials. However, if the incentive for financial gain by pharma companies is limited, then I think there would be a natural reaction to that being more targeted research, smaller budget on research, and in that way potentially a chilling effect on innovation. And that's maybe the negative side of what I would see. In the U.S., are we paying too much for drugs? Probably. I see the benefit of how that impacts the rest of the world positively, because those profits are being reinvested in other markets that can't afford the same drugs. At the same time, if that profitability gets impacted, it will have a trickle-down effect, I think, on innovation eventually.
So Tim, in listening to this, it's just fascinating to me that these major issues are happening right now. And they're happening at such a rate and such a speed that we've probably not seen. Doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on, the amount of things that are changing at the rate that they're going is just not unprecedented, I guess is probably the best word. So from a coaching perspective, how do you counsel someone like Steve to say, hey, here are the things really to stay mindful about. Here are the things to really use as leadership tools so that he can lead his company in a way that, reduces risk, enhances opportunities, all those kinds of things.
Yeah. So I'll take a step back on that first before I answer, but I think, I go back to this term that came up from the U.S. Army of VUCA, right? Volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. We are in the middle of that, and add on to that speed. The speed at which things are happening, speed of information, all this kind of stuff is all sort of bundled up in one. And as I think about that, my framework that I always bring is this creative approach to things, right? I mean, you got to have a vision. You got to create teams that'll work together, because they got to work together when you're not there. But you got to show the love. You got to bring the caring that they need in order to know that, I'm safe here. It's the security, the psychological security is here, right? All those kinds of things, I think, are critical from a leadership perspective to be able to move forward. Now, that's a pretty high-level answer on that, and I don't know if that is super helpful, but the concept of pouring into your people and keeping them first and foremost, I think gets you through 90% of your challenges. So
it's a great point, Tim, and I love the context that it brings, because instead of getting caught up in any specific issue, you're saying no matter what the issue is, there's one way we're going to make it through this, and that's together. And if we focus on that, and here's another piece of context. I would say that the changes we're talking about today are less impactful than 5 years ago. During COVID times, when suddenly over one weekend we all found ourselves working from home and trying to figure out Zoom and Teams, and we made it. And not all companies made it, and there was some devastation there. But I've also saw a lot of creativity come out from restaurant owners that had to shutter, and then they go and do something else. We've hired people that had to close their small business, and they land with our company, and they're grateful for that now. So there are, for the those that stay focused and never give up, I think there's opportunities. I would put this within a context of There's always a base layer of change that's happening globally.
Right.
And then on top, there's the craziness that's happening all the time. And we've dealt with craziness before. The world has survived world wars, and we could get dramatic. My point is, one way or another, we will make it through this. And to your point, how do you make it through? You make it through with your team, and that team's ability to be able to pivot, adjust, bob and weave, and claw and scratch through.
And that requires a leader to be able to prioritize. Know what's important. What are your top 3 priorities? I could probably ask both of you guys, and you'd know what they are and be able to spit it out right away. And to be able to then convey that to your people so that they always know where you stand and what's important for them to be working on.
So it's funny. I'll give my senior management team credit for this one. Yes, I could tell you exactly what our top 4 priorities are right now. Even a year and a half ago, it would have been hit our budget. Hit the budget tomorrow, hit the budget this month, hit the budget for the year. That's all we need to do. It was short-sighted, right? So, and they were saying, we want more, and they were right. And the more is the vision beyond just hitting your numbers. The vision is it's going to be okay because we know where we're going. It's a great point.
Awesome.
Well, that is a great way to wrap this segment up.
Agreed.
I love that. I love exactly where your approach was for giving some guidance and really doing that in a way that is typical Tim, as I would call it. So once again, I'd love to thank Steve for joining us on another podcast.
Yes,
you're going to be on for another one, which will be great.
Have me back anytime.
Appreciate it. And Tim, as always, you can reach us at Applied Leadership Coaching. You can either Google search that or do alccoaches.com. You can find us on the web. Tim's also got lots of really great content coming out on LinkedIn and different social channels. So take a look and see if you can find that stuff as well. But we will catch you on the next episode.